Hey, this is Anney
and Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. So, as we're recording this, it is November 9th, 2020, and Joe Biden is the projected winner of the U.S. election. And votes are still being counted. Our own state of Georgia has yet to be called.
Right.
But we wanted to have a personal conversation about our reaction to the election and what we've went through. Sounds so dramatic, but it's kind of true.
It's true.
Yeah. So this one's not going to be, it's going to be a little different. It's going to be more conversational and more personal because it has been a rough week and kind of churning through that and having that conversation with you all.
Right. And I will say it was kind of special because Anney and I decided that because we are very much still practicing quarantine rules
Yes.
and we have a small bubble of people and we are in each other's bubble, that we would spend this time together. So during the actual election day, and a couple of days after, as we were watching the votes count, we decided to hang out. I think that was really special. That made me feel so much better. I think I kept saying that, even though both of us had different moments of like, we're physically nauseous, we're physically sick right now, we're physically in pain. But going through it together was really nice. So thank you, Anney.
Oh, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, it was really nice. And when we look back, we've talked a lot about leftover trauma from the 2016 election and having that anxiety going in. And then it's really hard for people who aren't in the United States. It's hard for me to overstate like this overwhelming feeling of fear that kind of is swept over our country. Like people were boarding up shops.
Yeah.
When I came home, this is terrible, but I normally don't like lock my door. I only put on the little slidey thing. I locked my door.
Right.
And having somebody there to share in those moments of despair and then those like blips of hope. It was nice.
It was. We had kind of distracted ourselves nicely. So that was a good point. I think for me, I kept saying to Anney, because I became very Southern at that point. I'm trying to like, let me feed you, let me do this for you, let me give you this, let me do this, whatever, because that's what I have to do. My focus is always like, I need a purpose. Give me a freaking purpose. I think I became the badgering Southern mom. So thank you for letting me do that.
It was very appreciated. Very appreciated. So it has been a very long and stressful week here to top off a long and stressful few years. It's been a long kind of lots of stress, and it really culminated. And I know some of you listeners wrote in after we did our episode on election stress disorder from other countries that you were feeling it too. So we don't want to leave anyone out. I'm sure the impact of this is not limited to the United States. But it was Saturday. The election took place Tuesday, November 3rd. And it wasn't until Saturday that around noon, I think, we got the news that Joe Biden was the projected winner of the 2020 election. And right now, the numbers there's still a lot to suss out with this election. So there aren't too many numbers or breakdowns by demographics. There are some interesting pieces coming out, and we'll surely keep an eye on those as they do. But for now, one number we do know is this was a record-breaking turnout election. It was the highest turnout in over a century, with over 74 million people voting for Biden. But over 70 million people voted for Trump, too. Trump, as we record this, still has not conceded.
But he sure has been golfing.
Oh, he sure has. And also, like, literally right before we started recording, I checked the news, and he's, like, fired somebody. Like, stuff is about to go down.
He's fired 4 of his own appointees. We know this, of different agencies. So it's happening. Things are happening.
Yeah, and that's sort of the scary thing, and we'll talk about that more in a second. And there has been, he he and his campaign have promised a series of litigations. Several of them have already been dismissed, but that's surely something that's going to happen. He did this like really gross 2 a.m. speech,
right,
where he kind of just rambled and spewed all this nonsense. But he was talking about how legal votes, and he easily won the election if you only look at legal votes. And it was so full of lies that most of the big television networks cut away from it.
Yeah.
So that happened. And right now, there is a big discussion of withholding of funds to the Biden transition team.
Right. Right now, there is an agency, which is a smaller agency that we don't talk about often, which is the General Service Administration. And this administration are the ones in charge of signing over transition stuff. So they have all of the funding. They have pretty much, they're the ones that keep all the codes and the numbers and the transfers. So the administrator is Emily Murphy, and she has so far not refused to sign, but has not signed the necessary paperwork in the transition of office. By the way, she is a Trump-appointed administrator. So there's a lot to be said about that. And we already know Biden is in full force of creating his transition plans with also several executive orders at the very beginning of his presidency. So he is getting ready to kind of turn over all the things, including the Paris Agreement, including the UN, including the WHO. So we know things are happening on their end. He already has a coronavirus task force underway. So it's some beautiful things that we know are coming, but there's a lot of question about whether there'll be a delayed and transfer administration and what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Frustrating, to say the least.
Yes.
And we did want to talk about Kamala Harris for a second, because in this election, she becomes the first female vice president, the first Black woman vice president, and the first South Asian American woman vice president in the White House, in these like president, vice president positions. So that's a lot of first. And it was moving to see people reacting to that. And I had planned on saying this at the ending, but I'm just going to go ahead and put it in there because I did see this thing, which kind of annoys me, but I totally get. They're not perfect candidates.
Right.
I know it. We know it. But that's still a big deal.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, we know these are not the perfect candidates. This was not my choice. We actually, when I sat to celebrate with my neighbors, we kind of toasted each other and all yelled across the porches at each other, which was beautiful. I admitted that. I was like, I get that these are not the perfect. I did not want them as a ticket. This is my dream ticket. And I remember, saying what I wanted. But the fact of the matter is, this is a slow beginning of trying to go back so far back from what we have become, this huge divisiveness. And, Biden's speech alone was very religious, and I'm not religious. So, of course, there was a lot of people like, please don't do that. But what I care about is, do we have a point of where we can find a way of transitioning to the better? Because we are not in the better.
Yeah. And I mean, there's certainly something to be said about how much, when I try to silver lining everything with Trump, and it's not really a silver lining so much as it really highlighted a lot of issues, a lot of things that are broken in our system. And I totally get when people are celebrating, like, well, remember when Biden did this or this. We should remember those things. And we do remember those things. But just to put that out there.
Right. And then also, again, we've talked about it before, and I'll talk about it again. The fact that Kamala had to go over all the hurdles, and people are upset at the tactics that she used and her policies and her past policies, forgetting about the good that she did do. And I think that's part of the problem that I have with this whole conversation, is that we are not acknowledging the intersectionality of who she is and of the actual hurdles and all of the things that she had to go through in order to get to this place. And is politics gross? Abso-freaking-lutely. Is trying to get ahead gross? Abso-freaking-lutely. But we have been taught as women in this generation, in her generation, to play by the rules, by their rules, to get to the point that we can break those ceilings. And this is where I have a hard time when we just dismiss all of that and say she's an awful candidate, all of these things, and a law and order candidate, which, by the way, there's such a huge difference between the rhetoric between the left and the right about she is not left enough, not free enough, not open enough, not liberal enough, to the right say she's too liberal, she's going to be a socialist. Look at her. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Which is always the case for everyone I know, but it's just almost hilarious how she is damned if she does, damned if she doesn't.
Yes, which is the situation. The tightrope many women.
All the time.
All the time. So let's get personal, Samantha. How was this election week to you? Because as of tomorrow, it will be officially a week since Election Day.
Right. There was a lot of back and forth. I think I was really hesitant in reaching out to too many people because as much as I wanted to check in on everyone, I know a lot of people didn't want to acknowledge it right now. They did their part, now we wait. What else is there to do but wait? And to keep drudging yourself into it felt like a punishment in itself. But I will say, I felt like I was going through one of the worst breakups ever. Like, that's what it feels like to me, where your stomach is in the, it's just all knotted up. Every time you stop trying to think about it, it kind of pops into your head. I would fall asleep, my heart would race because I remembered, oh my God, this is happening. This is what's at stake. This is what we're looking at. And even in trying to celebrate, I still didn't celebrate.
Yeah.
I think, because I'm still hesitant to see what's happening. I don't truly believe, I feel like, as a pessimist, I don't truly believe everything's okay, which it's not. We will acknowledge that it's not okay. It's not a fix-all. It didn't fix everything. There's so much to be done. And it feels like, okay, I don't know how to celebrate because there's so much more to be done. Yeah. I don't know how to celebrate because the broken relationships that have been shown to light. And I don't know how to come out of it. So there's a lot of things that I'm like, okay, up and down, up and down, up and down. But there's definitely that one huge weight off of me of knowing, okay, we've gone past this part. Step number 1, we got it.
Yeah.
So it's been a whole thing. And I know you've been there as we're trying to take care of each other. I've had good people in my life to take care of me. So I'm very, very grateful for that. This is also one of those moments where I acknowledge that my family is my chosen family. I love my adoptive family very much, but we are definitely on two sides of this. And my heart broke because of that. My heart breaks because of that. So I feel like I can't fully celebrate because of the brokenness of my family.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of a whole thing. But again, very grateful for my chosen family that I am with, that we can celebrate this thing. But yeah, man, this whole week, my stomach, I'm pretty, there's a lot of physical things that's happening to me that I'm like, damn this stress, damn this election.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I celebrated Halloween as best you can during quarantine. And I'll tell you, it feels like Halloween happened 17 years ago.
Oh, my God.
It really feels so long ago. And the stress, I had physical, pain. I was dry heaving for, days because of this. And it was just so weird because I kept thinking, wow, should it be this stressful?
Right.
But it is.
It is.
And a lot of my friends were texting me, and I kind of shut down. I got to the point where I was like, I think my friends, and I love it because they didn't used to be political, and now they really are, and I really appreciate it. But they were in I don't know if better mood. They were more hopeful than I was, or at least more willing to be hopeful, because I kind of just was unwilling. I was too scared. So I felt bad about that because I would wait until the end of the day and I'll be like, okay, I'll answer all these text messages. And I didn't want to cause anybody worry, and I did want to be there for people, but it was so stressful. And yeah, I mean, I remember when you and I were sitting there on election night, and you were in you had your big socks and you had your hood up and your blanket, and you kind of just shut down, and it was dark, and we were all kind of sitting there silently, too afraid to check the news, but also what is going to happen? Because people were boarding up stores. Like there was just this whole atmosphere of, I don't know what is going to go down tonight.
Right. Yeah. So I got really, my partner bought me really thick booty socks is what I call it. Because there's no way I can fit those into shoes, but they're so thick and cozy. It was perfect. But yeah, I definitely had the moment where I put my hoodie on. I laid down because everybody knows, I'm pretty sure we all have figured out that I'm probably some sort of narcolepsy in there because I got so stressed out. I was like, I'm going to sleep now. And then you dove into your fan fiction. I was like, yep, this is where we are today.
Yep. our very different methods of dealing with stress are coming out. Yeah, I wrote like 50 pages that day. Just couldn't stop.
I was impressed. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, and my dog was reading it with you.
Yes, she was. She was into it.
She was enthralled.
Yeah, she was like, look at her go. Look at all this angst. Fill the page. Surely she'll run out of angsty situations. No.
Nope.
No. Never. I think looking back, the worst day for me was probably Thursday. Friday was really uneven. Like Friday I went through periods of like, oh, it's going to be okay. And then like the depths of despair where I'm sobbing doing an ad read, which really did happen.
Pick that one out if you can.
Yeah.
Fun game.
Sorry about it. But Samantha had an idea where on Thursday we both wrote down how we were feeling. And we thought we would read it, but I will warn you before we get into it, we were not in a good place.
We weren't in a good place. I think my thought was because it was at the beginning when we were understanding that Georgia was actually being flipped, that it was turning purple and light blue at that point, you know, in colors respect. And so it was such a shock to me to see that happen. And I was like, we need to document how we're feeling right now. But it was still at the beginning of, we're not hoping for too much. So yeah, it's not pretty. Mine is really dark.
Mine's much shorter. Just like,
I just went in. So apologies. And if you do have election stress disorder, as we talked about before, you don't have to listen to this part because I think this might trigger it.
Fair warning.
So, and Annie was like, please do a dramatic reading. I don't know if I can do a dramatic reading, but I can tell you, I might start panicking in the middle of it. All right, so here is my thoughts as I wrote it down. Well, as we sit here on the day after National Voter Election Day, I sit in panic, but with some hope. But can I be just completely honest? Hope feels cruel, and the idea of having Anney seems too hard to linger in. Panic and disbelief that it is this hard of a fight to what I would thought would be human morality. I sat and wondered about a lot of things that could or could not be, and my heart rate just goes up. I have fought for so long for justice and advocacy for our kids and youth, but to see a country that would say they're about saving lives and children to disregard all of that as us versus them is so disheartening. I feel like we are sitting on a cusp of so many new and broken things. Broken because it has brought out a lot in the light, and we have lost faith in some of the people we looked up to so closely. I have cried more this year for the loss and grief over all the loss of life, loss of justice, loss of families, and loss of kindness. And yes, there's been so much good as well, but times like this, when it comes down to numbers and statistics, it doesn't always translate. And please know, grief does not equal giving up, but better yet, just a bigger push for us to keep fighting. These last few years have not shown us anything unknown, but just brought out all of the dirtiness that had been comfortable in the background. And yes, this is just, by the way, this part is, I just added this part because I was like, oh my God, Samantha, what is wrong with you? You are so dark. By the way, this is how I wrote as a teenager too. But yeah, so this is just a little caveat from today. And yes, now that I look back on this, the things that I've written, the mere relief is overwhelming. I still hesitate in celebrating because even though there is a victory there are also still hurdles for us to find healing and a recognition that this administration has brought to light a lot that is broken in our system and brought into light relationships that were damaged but never talked about but can't be ignored anymore. And I think for me right now, like as I sit in relief, I feel like I'm just getting prepared for fights to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. We'll return to that towards the end, but I still feel very uncertain because the Trump campaign has been relatively quiet. Like
Too
they're
quiet.
still doing stuff for sure, but like they haven't really done what they have to say something that I don't know. Anyway, here's what I wrote down Thursday. I feel nauseated and scared, and my head hurts, and I'm legitimately physically terrified. I'm too afraid to hope, and I'm really upset that a lot of races I had hoped for in the House and Senate did not turn out how I hoped. It feels like the world will end, that we're in limbo before the country is embroiled with even more hate and violence. It feels like a repeat. It feels surreal, like I'm living in a weird bubble where this could be the last time everything is kind of okay, and that I could believe that it could be kind of okay.
Yeah, you're just very much smaller, shorter. I will say this was my idea, so understandably, you're like, I don't want to do this.
I think when this happened, I was at like my lowest.
You
point
were.
too.
Both of us were like, okay.
Well,
what is going to happen?
As you said that, because we had similar concerns and like feeling of a loss of hope and being too afraid to hope. And it is interesting to me that we both wrote this after, as you said, we were getting news that perhaps Georgia, like at the time, we didn't know how it would play out. And again, it still hasn't been called, but it was turning blue. And I wonder if there's that moment of like, this is impossible. It felt like this cannot be.
Well, that was one. But two, I think I remember the last election when I had gone to sleep and everybody was so sure Hillary was going to win. Mm-hmm. Like that was the same thing. I was like, oh, her numbers are pretty high. We're good. She's only this far away, this all far away. And then because I dared to hope, when I woke up, I was so more disappointed, like so much more disappointment to me that I was like, oh my God, I'm crushed. So again, because we've been traumatized by that, to look at this and be like, nah, you're not going to trick me again. Nah, man, you're not going to make me think that everything's good. Nuh-uh.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like when we talked about it in the election stress episode, that is, I think, one of the biggest differences for me, where I'm someone who usually, I feel things very, very strongly. So it's odd to, well, it's not odd, it makes total sense. But yeah, that was the biggest difference is in 2016, everything felt so much like sharper. And this time I've just dulled to the pain. Like, even if it does still hurt, and I was too scared to hope. And I'm still there. I'm still at that point of like, afraid. I
mean, as we speak right now, as of Saturday, I haven't looked, there was 200 Trump protesters in front of the Capitol demanding that they stop the count and recount. And then to also count all the votes, it was very funny because they couldn't decide.
A little mixed message.
Right. But they were ready to go. And people had driven down 2 hours to protest at the Capitol, which to me, again, is such a funny thing that they are accusing their own administration. These are the Republicans who are handling the votes. The Secretary of State is appointed by Kemp, who has been an avid supporter of Trump. To think that they are the ones that's cheating somehow, it's really funny to me.
Yeah, I do like the mashup videos of the depending on where you are and how the votes are going, the Trump supporters count the votes or stop the counts.
Right.
But we did want to talk about our experience being in Georgia specifically during some of this. But first, we're going to pause for a quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor. So much to the shock of, I would say, both Samantha and I,
Georgia, and the nation.
Yeah, Georgia kind of became a political focus during all of this. And yes, the recount and already negative ads. And I appreciate all of the listeners and friends of mine who don't live here who have reached out and apologized that we're going to have to deal with that for the foreseeable future. I've already requested my absentee ballot, which you can do if you live in Georgia. Go ahead and do it.
Right. Right. So I know I've gotten questions before about if you do live in Georgia, how do you do this? This is just like any other election. Make sure you're registered because they're going to purge. Guarantee there's going to be a purge. Make sure you're registered. If you want to do your absentee, make sure you go ahead and request that absentee. I think I want to do the early voting.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I'm scared because of this negativity and this whole like back and forth with the Supreme Court. I'm like, I'm going to go early vote. I'm just going to make sure I'm still registered. I'm going to do early voting. I also want a sticker. I missed my sticker.
I missed my sticker too.
Yeah, so I'm gonna early vote, and I will say Fulton County has which is Atlanta for those who don't know, has a really good system because the Atlanta Hawks and all of them decided to donate the space and time for the State Farm Arena, which made it almost so easy to go in and out and all of that. And we even had the assistant coach for the Atlanta Hawks being there, helping with that. So that's even more beautiful. But yeah, I'm going to be early voting. But for those who are asking, make sure you're registered. If you want an absentee, request it. If not, make sure you're on to see the dates and the locations.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it, and a part of me was a little shocked because as you listeners all know, there's only really one show I still watch on TV, and it's Supernatural. So it's the only way I see ads. And I was already seeing like all these ads, and I was like, this is too soon. But then I thought about it. It's not that far away.
It's not.
January 5th. So just go ahead and take care of all that stuff. Get your voting plan, as they say.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. It was one of those things where I was too nervous to hope still. And so I had a group of friends that I'm really close with who are from Georgia. Some of them are not in Georgia anymore. And they were just texting me all kinds of stuff and so excited. And I didn't respond because I was like, it's no way this is going to turn. Like right now it looks good, but some county is going to show up. And I don't know. But
I mean, there was even a moment when they said that there was a voter machine out in Fulton County and they needed it. And they didn't announce what happened. They just said they had to recount something. Yeah. And I was like, oh, here we go. This is what we're going to say. They're going to duplicate something, blah, blah, blah. And instead, it just pushed up the numbers for the Biden votes, which made me kind of laugh, I'm not going to lie. A little bit petty there. But that was the only other issue. And then we also had one of the poll workers being doxxed here as well because it showed him throwing out something which ended up being just like the instruction sheets. Yeah. And it wasn't anything to do with the votes, and they were able to prove it, and they were able to discredit that as him throwing out a ballot. But they got doxxed for it, and now they're in danger and they're in hiding. Like this is the most absurd thought, and I'm so sad that people who volunteer to do their civic duty and to volunteer to help are in danger now.
Yeah. That's terrible. And it's, you could feel, especially on Saturday, they were like, because Atlanta is pretty blue. So you could feel the excitement of people in Atlanta when it was happening, and there were fireworks outside my apartment. You could see the fireworks. Fireworks all around, and then CNN they were in Midtown Atlanta, and there was this huge celebration going on, and most people were wearing masks, which was good.
Everybody was wearing masks. And we have to also talk about Stacey Abrams. And she's not the only one. We are not crediting her with the whole thing, but she definitely pushed with Fair Fight Action, which I think I mispronounced the last episode that we talked about. I said firefight, which, by the way, what? Fair Fight Action and what they did in pushing to get voters registered. I will say I've gotten the most amount of postcards, the most notifications, the most phone calls and texts reminding me to get a voter plan this election. And it has everything to do with not only Fair Fight Action, we're going to talk about other organizations that are part of it a little later down. So if you want information how to help, I know I've gotten some people asking me that. But the many different organizations, and most of them that are really made a push, it's mainly marginalized community who has been putting in this fight, whether it's the Latinx community or the Asian American community or even the Black community that have really pushed harder and fought real hard on this. And it's been amazing because even for Gwinnett County, which has been still counting apparently, even though they're done, they haven't completely registered everything. There's a big immigration community there. And the AAPI organizations here have pushed to make sure that things have been translated appropriately for them, and so that their instructions are given, because that's been neglected so often that there's no translations and it's all in English, which is a completely bias, obviously. But communities and organizations like that have made a push, which also helped to register correctly and to be able to vote. So it's been an amazing thing here in Atlanta, and seeing these communities come together and fight it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and you can't forget that. And these grassroots organizations, or organizations, a lot of them run by Black women specifically, who've been working for years to get people registered to vote and to make sure that they show up, and will continue to work. That is hard, never-ending work. And
they are now in overtime.
Yeah, exactly. I did really appreciate, I just want to shout out my friend Marissa, who is a friend of the show, has been on the show. She sent me, gotta be 50 TikToks of people's reaction to Georgia flipping. These really hilarious, like, I need a hero. And it's like Georgia shows up. It was really good.
Did you see the ones with the maps?
I don't know. Did I?
So it's like, they put lips on maps, you know, talking to each other. Nebraska talking to Pennsylvania, not Nebraska, Nevada talking to Pennsylvania, and then all of a sudden Georgia comes in.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, y'all, what's up?
Well, I saw the one, Marissa sent me the one where it's Thanos, and he's like, fine, I'll do it myself. Much appreciated, Marissa. I don't have TikTok, so I depend on her to send me the best ones, which I think she does, and I did really appreciate that. And I know I had some friends who, from Georgia, who said, you know, it's nice to see something positive about our state when it comes to voting, which I totally agree with.
I will say, I liked several people's tweets that, like, don't ever talk about the South and Georgia being the South and being the problem. We're working, and we've been working.
Well, also, was that you showed me one of talking about the football, the Super Bowl, where they they blew the lead, and like, never bring that up again. Never.
For at least for a little while. You can't hold this against us.
Yes. So that was fun. That was an unexpected, rare glimmer of fun during all of this.
Yes.
So we were not together on Saturday when the winner was projected to be Biden. So how did you react when you found out?
So initially I sat here and just kind of just looked at the phone, because I get all of my results off my phone because I'm on streaming networks. I don't have cable here. And I didn't believe it, because it was first, I think I saw it through CNN. Even though they're trustworthy, I still didn't want to be like, until I hear Fox announce it, I'm not going to believe this. And then when I saw even Fox, I think it was like 30 minutes later, right? Who stated that it was a projected winner. I just kind of sat here in shock. Like, for me, I don't react quickly. I have a moment of like, okay, calm. And just think it through. Is this possible? Have I been lied to? Is this a joke? What is happening? And then I think as I started reading everybody's posts, everybody's tweets, going through, that I was like, okay. And it was literally just being able to breathe. And that's what I felt. Nothing else. Like, it wasn't like joy and over the top. Like, I didn't start screaming. I didn't do anything. I just started breathing again. And that's exactly what it was. So about an hour later, I was like, oh, I'm by myself. What do I do by myself? And even though I wanted to kind of go out and about, it felt like I felt exhausted. Like, as if someone, like, I've been running for a marathon and then just finally quit. So I was like, all right. I live in a small, like, a quadplex, I guess, where I do have a few neighbors. So I was like, anybody want some champagne? I got some bubbles. And that was it. Like, that's all I could do. What about you?
So I think it was CNN, and a friend of mine had been texting back and forth where we were saying, you know, I'll believe it when they announce it about Georgia. Because all of our other friends had been celebrating, and we were kind of more hesitant. And I happened to refresh the page right when we were texting, and I was like, I think Pennsylvania and Biden's the projected winner. But that word projected made me really nervous.
Right. Still.
And I kept thinking, like, God, if I, like, an hour from now, they're like, whoops.
Right.
So so many people started sending me messages, and they were so excited, and all these happy gifts. And I felt like I was in, and somebody sent me this message, like I was in the last 20 minutes of a horror movie where, it seems like the monster is dead, and yet there are 20 minutes left.
Right.
It's not all done. And that's kind of where I still am. I feel better as the days gone on. And like when Biden gave his speech, which I did not watch, by the way.
Oh, you didn't?
I got highlights of it. But then I felt more, okay, it seems like this is happening, that we're all agreeing, except for the Trump campaign, that he won. And so I feel better now, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. And there is a part of me that worries I'm going to look back on this very episode one day and think, oh, you poor thing. You didn't know. It's like I all the time I bring up with Samantha, remember when we did that Hello 2020s episode?
Right.
Oh, geez, we didn't know what was coming.
Yeah, we were fairly wrong.
I don't know that we were wrong. We just missed all the very big key points.
Well, I guess we didn't know at that point about the virus, right? That didn't come into light till February, right?
Yeah, I think we heard a little bit about it, but it was kind of just like, this thing in China, I think. I think we knew about it, but it was at the very bottom of our radar. And February was when we started to be like, oh, wait.
There's something happening.
Yeah. And then the end of February, beginning of March, it turned into, oh, no.
I think that's when we came back from LA and we're like, oh, no. Those cases started happening when we were there.
Yep. And then I went to Canada and you went to Orlando.
Right.
Oof.
And that's when everything started to be canceled. Everything was being canceled then. I was like, oh, no, this is for real.
I thought I was going to be trapped in Canada, which, by the way, Canada, I would have been happily trapped there.
Right. I'm sorry, Florida. I didn't want to stay there. I love you, but not to live there.
Yes. We were in very different places. And yeah, I'm really nervous about the lame duck period. I'm really nervous about the damage that has been done and could still be done. I feel like it's really changed the precedent. Emboldened white supremacists. I think that Trump supporters will be violent and threatening in the coming weeks and months and years, probably.
Yeah, and as we've seen, as they're doing the count, it wasn't even projected, or it wasn't even called from many states. They were standing there with guns. I know there was 2 arrests for threats, and they've been there with guns. That's the part that blows my mind, is that, well, we know why. We know why this is being allowed, and we know why it's not become a bigger issue, which I love the rhetoric, which is saying, look, we're protesting. I say we. There's protests here, and there's no rioting or looting. And I'm like, well, that's also because you didn't get gassed or bombed or pushed back or arrested. So, which is interesting, because the other protests, none of them really had guns, but yet were pushed back like that.
Yeah.
And you are illegally on public or government property with guns, which is absolutely against the law, and nothing's being done. So there is not necessarily that they are being peaceful. It's just that the reaction is very different.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that's a whole big conversation in itself. And that's what scares me, is that we've already seen it happen and nothing's being done. We saw the caravan that went and tried to push a bus off of the road, and nothing was done. So these are the conversations that we have. It's like there's a lot of fear because of the reactions and protests, and not because of what's being done in reaction. I think that makes sense. And yeah, that absolutely has me fearful. And the continued rhetoric of pushing back, calls to arms, calls to all of these different antics that are not being questioned as high as much as it should be. Because it feels like now that we're here, the Democrats are still saying, do this middle ground.
Yeah.
Instead of change. And that's also something that I'm afraid of. And I think AOC has been calling that out very quickly, like quit doing this, because for some reason, John Kasich is giving credit for Biden's win. Like the Democratic Party, the platform has been giving John Kasich the credit for being able to get this election instead of the many marginalized communities who've come together with funding and advocacy and the grassroots campaigns being credited for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really ugly that they are not acknowledging who it should be acknowledged. And I think that needs to be called out very quickly because this white man did not win it.
Yeah.
Sorry. He was a cute little whatever background dancer, sure. But he was not the forefront of what was happening. Just because he made a couple of speeches does not mean he won something for anyone else. Right. So I think that's part of my fear as well. It's like, what do we do in making sure, A, that history does not rewrite itself into seeing how and who won this election.
Yeah.
B, that we do protect the community and don't sleep on the fact that there are extremists out there who are willing to go to violent extremes to take what they think is theirs or what they think have been injustice, which is absolutely ridiculous. And C, do we actually see change?
Yeah.
And holding them accountable for that change.
Yeah, because it's going to be tough with all the gridlock. And I kept thinking, I was really struck by how this whole thing reminds me of an abusive relationship of like the gaslighting and the lies and the threats and the erosion of trust in yourself and reality, because it's kind of how I feel right now of like you said, it's a bad breakup or just, it's not even that I don't trust Trump and his campaign, which I absolutely don't. I almost don't trust myself to be a good judge of reality anymore.
Right.
And that is like long-lasting damage, and that's stuff we're going to have to face. I did want to end on some positive things, and then we do have listener mail on this one.
Yes.
It was really cool to see people all over the world and the United States celebrating. I love everybody who dressed up as mailboxes here. One of my favorite clips currently is of those two mailboxes like grinding against each other. That was so funny. That was really nice. Like I said, it was really cool to see my friends, a lot of them who haven't been politically active, get really into it and being involved in like what counties are flipping, and they were texting me about Stacey Abrams, and it was cool that Georgia was so close, and potentially I'm hoping they'll say it soon, even though there'll be a recount. Potentially did flip, and I love that so many people texted me simply yub nub,
which, by the way, part of our togetherness was to watch that Ewoks movie, the Ewok Adventures. Yeah. I will say it was better than the holiday special.
Oh, well, that's not saying much. It was pretty bad. But it was enjoyable. But yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Yub Nub is like the little Ewok hooray song they sing at the end of Return of the Jedi, the original non-edited version when the Empire is defeated.
She was very upset by the remake of that.
I am. I'm sorry I got so angry about it. Is there any other hopeful thing you want to add before we get to some listener mail?
No, yeah, I think just make sure you keep being involved. Let's not let this momentum die. We got to keep pushing. We got to keep fighting. And yeah, again, we have to hold the people we elected accountable. And again, also, we need to readjust and look at some of the voting tactics and policies at this point. But yeah. Yeah.
And don't forget, there are other elections, that not just presidential ones. So keep up to date on that. But yes, we did want to read some listener mail, but first we have one more quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor. And we are back with a letter from Joe. Joe wrote, I just finished listening to your election stress disorder episode, and I had to write in. I'm an immigrant in Canada, but I'm also feeling the stress of the U.S. election. I have a PhD in biology, and many friends from my grad times have moved to the States to do postdocs or professorships. My heart is with you all. Oh, thank you. I wanted to write in to share what I've been doing to keep stress at a decent level. My first one is that I'm running my first half marathon this Saturday.
Ooh.
That means I'm tapering, running much less than usual to give my body time to heal before race day this week, and jittery because I want to go outside for a run and I can't. Sigh. That takes me to my second stress reliever, and the one I've been relying on the most, cross-stitching.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find a full-time job since the beginning of the pandemic. I moved with my partner across the country in March for his postdoc. And cross-stitch has been my sanity saver since then. I've been stitching since I was 7, but I took a long break in my 20s. This year, I figured out I really enjoy not just stitching, but also designing my own stuff. I opened a little Etsy shop, and I've been sharing my patterns there. I do science geeky stuff, and I have a large section dedicated to what I call Sci-Pride, science-supporting pride. I'm attaching a couple of pics of my favorite stitches, and here's my Insta if you want to see more. Instagram.com/crossstitchgeek. Love the podcast and keep up the amazing work. I'm rooting for the best in the United States. Yes. Well, thank you so much. And yes, definitely go check out the Instagram. The pictures you sent were amazing, Joe. I love them. I definitely am tempted. And also I went down a very fun rabbit hole of I want a geeky, nerdy candle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I used all my candles when the power went out and also during Halloween for the pumpkin. So I need more candles. And I was like, well, if I'm in the market for candles, I might as well be in the market for candles.
Which is fair. Yeah, I might have to get a pattern cross-stitch.
They're awesome.
Work for me. I might have to do it.
Yes, they're really awesome. And thank you for the kind words and for thinking of us during this very stressful election time. And then Teresa wrote, I write academic horror analysis with some friends of mine. And since you both love horror movies, I thought I'd invite you to check out our site. We're called What Sleeps Beneath. Based on what you guys discuss on the podcast, I think you'd really like our takes on Ginger Snaps and the Exorcism of Emily Rose. Your episode on supernatural minstrel horror was awesome, and it is right in line with a research project that we're working on for a conference at the end of November called Rural Gothic, Women in Folk Horror. If you have a moment to check out our blog, I would love to hear your thoughts. I listen to you guys every week. I really like everything you do. Thank you. And the blog is awesome. I love it so much. It is right up Samantha and I's alley.
Yep.
Perfect for Feminist Movie Fridays. And we wanted to share it with you listeners if there's anyone interested in learning more about horror and women and just academic horror analysis.
Yes.
Yes.
More of that, please.
And please, if you are working on anything cool, listeners, we're happy to share it. So send it our way.
We love it. And we wanted to add that listener Lauren, she reached out on Instagram asking how to help with the Senate runoffs. As you know, we have 2 runoffs, which could decide the majority of the Senate.
Yeah. Georgia.
Yes, I'm very excited. It's so crazy. So right now we have John Ossoff versus David Perdue, and Reverend Raphael Warnock versus Kelly Loeffler. So those are big things to look at. And I know people have asked, as Lauren has asked, since she is not a Georgia resident, what she can do to help. So we thought we would just put a few organizations that have been a huge part of why our state has turned blue, including, we already talked about Fair Fight Action, which is fairfight.org. And then also Georgia Muslim Voter Project, which is GAMVP.org. Asian Americans Advancing Justice, which is advancingjustice-atlanta.org. Black Votes Matter, which is blackvotesmatterfund.org. New Georgia Project. You can just look them up. They have a good organization. And then the organization GALEO, which is GALEO.org, which is a Latinx organization that has helped as well. And then Latino Community Fund Georgia, which is LCFgeorgia.org. Asian American Advocacy Fund, which is AsianAmericanAdvocacyFund.org. And of course, you can follow Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff to see how to donate or more. And I know they're talking about getting people to do phone banks, writing, and helping with registrations and stuff. Of course, there are some that are not allowed outside of the state of Georgia, I think. I don't know exactly what those are, but I know these organizations are nonprofits and grassroots organizations that you can assist with as well. And they have been huge proponents to why our state is now at this point, which is a huge cause for celebration. It's also a lot more anxiety.
Yes. So definitely check those out. And we do appreciate you listeners checking in because our anxiety level will be high. Georgia is going to be bombarded with political ads. So we're going to keep an eye on that. In the meantime, thanks so much to those listeners for reaching out to us. If you would like to reach out to us, we would love to hear from you. Our email is stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You or on Twitter at MomStuffPodcast. Thanks as always to our super producer, Andrew Howard.
Thank you, Andrew.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.